Hello, ladies and brave gentlemen joining us. My name is Tiffany Dawn, and welcome back to another episode of Life Advice that you do not hear in church. So hit subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And today, we're going to talk about, hey church, let's stop shaming single people.
You know, every time I review an article or a video from some sort of Christian women's ministry, the number one message I see being broadcast to so-called Christian women has nothing to do with teaching these women how to improve their behavior and better their lives. Instead, it's just telling Christian women that the church, or society, or anyone other than themselves needs to stop shaming women. Seldom is there anything about encouraging women to stop engaging in destructive behavior. But the thing is, women should feel ashamed when they do destructive, stupid things. Shame helps incentivize you and those around you not to repeat bad behaviors. So instead of telling other people to stop shaming single women, why isn't Tiffany instead encouraging single women to stop engaging in blatantly shameful behavior? What really is going to improve their circumstances in the long run?
Now, if you're like me and you've grown up in church, maybe you're thinking, I don't think single people are being shamed in church. Like, what is this about? That's so dramatic.
You're right. It is overdramatic. No one is walking up to single women and out of the blue telling them they shouldn't be single. It's the women themselves who perpetually complain about being single and then blame others for noticing.
But here's the idea of shaming, right? There's a certain mold, and it's very specific, and all of our lives should fit into that mold. And when we don't fit in that mold, the mold is not questioned. We are. There's this idea that if you don't fit in the mold, there's something wrong with you, or maybe you're not a good Christian, maybe you're not in tune with God's voice, maybe you're just struggling in your walk with God. The mold is never questioned. Just all the people who don't fit in that mold. And there's this idea that there's something wrong with us. That's the idea of shame. And I think this happens a ton, really in all circles of life, but I've seen it a lot in Christian circles. And I don't think it's intentional. I think people are full of good intentions and well-meaning advice, but people come away with this idea that there's something wrong with me.
Granted, just because your life doesn't fit into a certain mold does not in and of itself mean there is anything wrong with you. But again, in my experience, it's not that people are just randomly confronting single women about their singleness and chastising them for not fitting into a certain mold. It's the women themselves that are vocally and perpetually complaining about being single to others, and then subsequently blaming those people for the shame that they feel. However, if you're single and it is your desire to be in a relationship, and you repeatedly find yourself unable to get into a successful one, it would be foolish not to engage in some introspection and figure out if anything you're doing could be dragging you down. After all, you'll never be able to change other people, but if you want to better your circumstances, the one person you for sure can change is yourself.
There are so many areas where I've seen shaming happen in church. Everything from how you study your Bible, to the career you make, to how you approach singleness. And
criticizing people for any of those things does not equate to shaming. It's one thing if someone is going above and beyond to tell people who aren't involved in a situation about someone else solely for the reason of making that other person feel bad. But for women, shaming just means criticizing. If no one ever criticizes you, constructively or otherwise, it's unlikely that you'll stop engaging in bad, harmful behaviors.
I see this happening a lot to single people in church circles.
I seriously doubt that this is true. I bet what she sees is a lot of single women loudly complaining about being single, and then crying profusely the moment someone points out that their own behavior and unreasonable standards are contributing to their singleness. This isn't shaming, but quite often these women should feel ashamed.
I know for me, one of the ways I felt this a lot was people always telling me if once I became content in the Lord and stopped looking for a husband, that's when God sent my husband. And I felt so much shame about that when I was single. I was always feeling like, what is wrong with me that I can't get to that place of losing the desire for a husband? I want to get married still, and I'm trying to convince myself and God and everyone else that I don't want to get married, but the truth is I do. I just can't get rid of that desire. And I felt a lot of shame and this idea of what is wrong with me for feeling this way.
Tiffany is actually right on this point. No amount of praying or reading one's Bible or any other spiritual activity will guarantee that you'll secure a relationship. However, in a previous video, Tiffany admitted that she spent nearly 10 years pining after the same guy who wouldn't make their relationship official. So who really was responsible for her being single all that time?
I never questioned the mold. I never questioned that maybe I didn't have to lose a desire, and maybe God would not hold out on me just because I still wanted to get married. I just questioned myself. That is a shaming message.
No, it's a rational message. Granted, sometimes the reasons people cite for your singleness don't actually have anything to do with it, like the measure of one's spiritual involvement. But it is quite possible that a woman's own behavior is affecting her ability to secure a long-term relationship, be it holding men to unreasonably high standards, sleeping around, or any of the other behaviors that marriage-minded men rationally avoid in women.
And the idea of our sexuality that is not talked about. It's ignored. It's acted like it's not even there sometimes, other than the purity talk. And if you have messed up in some way, God help you, because that is the worst thing that could happen.
A bit of an exaggeration, but essentially true. Men who are interested in marriage understand that a woman being a virgin prior to marriage is one of the best indicators of whether or not the marriage will be a success. And the more sexual partners she has, the less likely the marriage is to be successful. If you want to have a successful marriage someday, then sleeping around is one of the worst things you can possibly do. It's your right to do it, of course, but you don't get to complain when marriage-minded men don't take you seriously.
That's the message that I felt was given in a lot of churches. So I want to share 3 things that I think we need to do to change this culture in churches as single people and as married people. The first thing we need to do is share our stories as though they are our own. Here's what I mean by that. Sometimes we share our stories, especially the stories that fit the mold, with this idea of it worked for me, so it should work for everyone. I was content. I didn't want to get married. Then God sent my husband. Therefore, that's true for everyone. And the thing is, it's not true for everyone.
No two people are exactly the same. However, that doesn't change the fact that certain behaviors have certain consequences. Overeating will eventually result in obesity. For everyone. Having unreasonably high standards for dating partners will lead to a lack of dating partners. For everyone. Having multiple intimate partners will reduce the likelihood that a woman's future marriage will be a success. For everyone. These are all very well documented. Just because no two people's stories will play out exactly the same way doesn't mean we shouldn't advise people about the predictable consequences of their actions.
I never stopped wanting to get married until the day I got married. I never lost that desire, and God did not hold out on me because I wanted a husband. I did not fit the mold. And when we share our stories as if our experience is going to be true for everyone, that especially when it's an experience that fits in the very narrow mold that we have in churches, that leads to feelings of shame for people who don't fit that mold.
The feelings another person experiences are not the responsibility of anyone but that person. But if a person feels ashamed for something they've done, it's quite possibly because they know that their behavior is in fact destructive or wrong. Your concern, if you truly want to help someone, should be telling them the truth, not making them feel good.
People who are feeling like, well, why can't I get there? Why can't my story be the same as hers? And so we just need to remember, like, just because our story was one way does not mean that we are any more spiritual or any more in touch with God's voice or any more obedient to God than someone whose story is different. We have to remember, just because you're not fitting this certain mold doesn't mean there's something wrong with you.
And it doesn't mean there isn't something wrong with you either. A woman might not be single because of some spiritual deficiency, but it might be because of something else they're doing, i.e. being promiscuous, or holding men to unreasonably high standards.
It just means that God works in different ways in each of our lives. The second thing we need to do is talk about sex and sexuality. We need to stop this stigmatized silence of just like, stay pure. That's the most important thing you can do, which, by the way, I'm just gonna say something kind of crazy, but that is not the most important thing you can do, okay? It's not. Like, I'm not saying it's not important. My husband and I save sex for marriage, and I am so glad we chose to do that. But it's not like the number one thing on God's list.
Maybe not, but it is extremely high on the list for men who are interested in getting married. Rational men understand that the more sexual partners a woman has before marriage, the more likely the marriage is to end in divorce. So if you're a woman and you're serious about getting married someday, then yes, staying pure is an extremely important thing to do and not something that should be treated frivolously.
Like, if you look at what the Bible talks about, like, what God is looking for is someone who's humble. Like, look at David. Look at all the mistakes he made, even sexual mistakes, but he was a man after God's heart because he was humble, because he knew he needed God and he wanted to know him more, right?
You know something else King David did? He felt ashamed when called out for his sexual sin. Read Psalm 51. After David sinned sexually by committing adultery with Bathsheba, he felt ashamed. He was genuinely sorry for what he did, and he experienced harsh consequences for the rest of his life. Why wasn't David criticizing the prophet Nathan to quit shaming him when he was called out? If you're trying to tell the church that they should stop shaming single women by calling out bad behavior, then you should not be appealing to King David. David was ashamed for his sexual sin, and rightly so.
Like, God is not like, oh, sex, the unforgivable sin. Like, we need to stop acting like it's this, I don't know, like, deep, dark vortex that no one talks about and no one goes there, and there's silence, and that gives the idea that it's shameful.
Sex in and of itself isn't shameful, but women being promiscuous makes them undesirable to marriage-minded men. This is a reality of life that isn't going to change, so get over it and quit claiming that telling women the truth about this is somehow shaming.
Our sexual desire does not begin when we get married. It has already begun. We are sexual beings before we get married too. And we need to talk about sex. We need to have healthy conversations and open conversations. We need to not be like shying away from like sex education. I remember having so many questions and feeling so guilty about everything, even just completely innocent stuff when I was single, because there was just a lot of shame and stigma and silence around the idea of sexuality, and that needs to change.
I actually agree with this point, but that doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater. Women need to know that while having sexual desires isn't wrong, getting hammered by multiple guys prior to marriage is going to ruin their chances of having a successful marriage someday.
So I would encourage you to check out my video called Sexuality, What Every Single Girl Needs to Know, as a way to get started in changing and talking about that. And the third and final thing that we need to do is only listen to people we trust. Here's the thing, literally everybody has an opinion on your life. That does not change. That was true when I was single, and it's true now when I'm a mom. Like, and have a baby on the way, right? When you're pregnant, when you have a toddler, like everyone knows what's best for your family, or thinks they do. And there's a lot of great and well-meaning advice, but what I've found is that at the end of the day, I need to have like 2 or 3 people who I trust. They're wise, they're trustworthy, and I really take their advice to heart. That doesn't mean I always agree with them or I always do what they think I should, but what it does mean is I take it seriously. If they have advice, I want to hear it, and I really consider that, to think about it, pray about it, talk about it.
I do agree that you shouldn't take advice from just anybody. But what's really more important is not who you trust, but why you trust them. Have they demonstrated their trustworthiness by backing up their assertions with evidence? If someone tells you that it's really no big deal if you have premarital sex, God will forgive you and any good man will marry you anyways, without citing any data in support, then that person is clearly not aware of how men and women tick, and shouldn't be the kind of person you're going to for relationship advice.
Everybody else, I just kind of take any other advice I get with a big whopping grain of salt. Or I just ignore it because everybody thinks they know, and if you're trying to juggle all the advice you're getting, it is just exhausting.
So instead, maybe start looking at results. Not every piece of advice you're getting is going to be correct. But if you're wanting to be in a successful relationship and are perpetually single, then clearly just doing more of what you're doing isn't going to fix the problem.
And so you have to be able to say, these are the people I'm listening to, who I trust, I respect, they are wise. And everyone else, like, I'm just gonna kind of let the voices blend in the background. And every once in a while, you'll hear something from somebody not in your inner circle, and it just like really sticks with you or irritates you. And in those moments, I would say lean into that. I remember this author, Sharon Garlow Brown, said, like, lean into the tension. If there's something that's really getting under your skin, that means there's something there. It doesn't mean their advice is necessarily right, but there's something there going on inside you that this is like opening a door for you to work on and work through. And so for me, like, I take those things to my counselor and my husband and the people I trust. I'm like, I'm struggling with what this person said. Why is this bothering me so much? And it opens up an opportunity to do some more deep healing work in my life with my own insecurities and past, and just a deeper healing. So when when you can't ignore something somebody's saying to you, like, dig a little deeper with people you trust. Not to say they're right in their advice, but to say, like, there might be something going on that God wants to heal you from or set you free from, or wants to just work in your life through this.
How about this? If the person you trust is giving good advice, you should be able to see the fruit of their good advice in their own lives and the lives of the people they're ministering to. Women like Tiffany Dawn, Allison Rowe, Katie Emerson, and others are all peddling the same advice about not shaming single women. And their comment section are full of women complaining about their singleness. On the other hand, women like the Transformed Wife's Lori Alexander are constantly being criticized about shaming women, yet the testimony of women who actually follow their advice is that their relationships are improving. At the end of the day, you can choose who you're going to put your trust in and put it in whoever you'd like. The question is, if this person is really telling the truth, how come we aren't seeing the results? I've never once seen a woman who preached about the need to stop shaming single women who subsequently found a successful relationship because of it.
So comment below, have you seen this idea of shaming single people? And what do you think needs to be done to change our culture into one that is free of shame and realizes that people are not all gonna fit the same mold? I can't wait to hear from you guys. Love you. Bye. And Happy New Year.
Okay, Tiffany, here's my advice. Single women, if you want to be in a relationship, ask yourself 2 questions. 1. Am I rejecting potential suitors in favor of some idea I have in my mind that may or may not be realistic? 2. Am I engaging in any behaviors that demonstrate to marriage-minded men that their lives are going to be better with me in it? Answer both of those, and I don't think it will be a mystery to you for much longer why you're single. And that is my 2 cents. Take it for what it's worth. Thanks everyone for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, as well as hit the bell to receive notifications so that you never miss an upload. And if you're a fan of my channel, please consider supporting me on Subscribestar, Bitbacker, or Patreon to receive special rewards. All links can be found in the About section of my website, my2centsvideos.com.